Awesome. So I will say before I get started, any questions, any comments, any feedback, just throw it in there. With this size group, I think we can do that. So my talk this morning is Get Out of the Back Row, Community Involvement Primer. Thought it was ironic that they put me in a room that basically has almost no back row for this talk. And I subtitled it, Don't Worry, We Don't Bite. So a bit about me. I'm a PHP developer, started working with PHP back in 1999. That is actually the highest quality version of the PHP 3 logo that exists, because back then no one really could notice all the jagged edges. So. I'm founder and CEO of Creativity. We're a PHP development firm. We focus on the Magento platform. That's a few of our team members at a conference just a few weeks ago, actually, demonstrating community involvement. We are from Texas, so we ran with the whole Texas theme with those bright orange hats. So I'm a frequent conference presenter. I'm an occasional open source contributor. I tweet way too much. You can find me online at joshuawarren.com or on Twitter at Joshua S. Warren. And this is very important, especially since I will know if you do not do this. So please go to Joined In. And if you go to joinedin/14035, you can download the slides. You can post comments, and most importantly, you can leave a rating. Those ratings help me improve these talks each time I give them. Also, a lot of conference organizers will look at these ratings to decide which talks they want, so definitely appreciate you go on there and leave a rating. So first up, I know it's early on a Saturday morning, so time for an exercise. But not that kind of exercise. A very practical exercise in community involvement. So find a person sitting near you, learn where they're from and what they do. So I will let the room do that.
I'm head of games. So we'll sit together. I'll write up my name.
Amanda.
I'm Tristan.
Tristan? Were you?
No, Weaver State.
Oh, Weaver State.
Yeah. So you must have hiring you East State.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was presuming.
Yeah. So I'm a network engineer. So build a network and design, build, implement, maintain the whole thing.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. What do you do with us?
I'm an intern, and I am developing an internship for women in minorities.
Oh, cool. That's kind of good.
A recursive intern.
That's funny. Yeah. You're basically making more of you.
Yes.
That's awesome. Very cool. So that's what I would like to see more of at conferences. So many times we end up just kind of in our own little bubble and not getting to know each other. So today's talk is all about community. Get used to hearing that word. We're going to be talking about community quite a bit. Now, when I say community, I'm using a very specific definition. There is a couple of, I believe they're anthropologists, that came up with this term called communities of practice. And they define a community of practice as a group of people that have a shared concern or passion for something, and they learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. So it can be online, it can be offline, it can be conferences, but it's basically we all share something even tangentially in common that we do, and we like talking about it. So, and then today, when I say community, we're going to discuss the open source community and all of the other communities it intersects with. I really like this conference because it's not just PHP, it's not just Java, it's a whole large group of communities coming together. We're also discussing the local community that forms around a conference each year. It's really interesting. If you go to Openwest, next year you're going to see some of the same people, some new people, and there's almost each conference has a feel that it develops from the community that builds around it each year. And then you may also be part of different communities as well, and I definitely encourage you to apply these lessons to those communities. We're not just talking about tech communities. This can apply to hobbies, to your local community, a lot of different things. I do want to give a warning after some good feedback on one of my other talks. I will be making some generalizations this morning. Please do not get mad at me. I will say that every individual is unique, so for the sake of time, I'm going to use some labels today. I'm going to use introvert, extrovert, lurker, newbie, things like that, but no one is a complete introvert or extrovert. It's no such thing. It really is just a range of traits. When I use those words, those are basically just averages that I'm using to aid our discussion. Also, don't make any assumptions about what I mean. If you have a question about a label I use, if it doesn't make sense, if it kind of rubs you the wrong way, just speak up so that I can go ahead and clarify that. With that out of the way, first up, we're going to split this into two sections basically. One for people new to the community and one for existing community members. So we're going to start with community involvement for lurkers and newbies. We're going to have a little quiz. Can you spot the tech conference? So there's number 1. There's conference number 2. And there's conference number 3. Note the almost everyone is sitting on a different row from each other, and someone is all the way in the back of the room. I will say, to be fair, they were basically sitting this way. I was picking on them from my talk yesterday, but they were mainly just clustered around the outlets, which I think can be another good way to spot a tech conference. So if you're new to conferences, don't be afraid to sit on the same row as someone you don't know. It's really interesting. I'll get to my talks pretty early, and I'll notice that until the room starts filling up more, you know, you get someone on this row, someone on this row, someone on this row. People don't like sitting next to each other. Don't be afraid to do that. I think that's one of the best things you can do at a conference is to meet new people, and you're not going to do that if you're kind of constantly isolating yourself. And again, to be fair, everyone in that last photo was just sitting near a power outlet. So we build up seasoned community members as heroes. I know coming into the PHP community, there was a lot of people that they were kind of up on a pedestal to me. I had to stop and realize they're real people too. So don't be afraid to approach them and talk to them. Generally, as I've gotten more and more involved, the only difference between a new community member and a well-known seasoned community member is time. They've just been involved in the community longer. And just because someone has been involved in a community longer than you doesn't make them unapproachable. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't just go up and talk to them. So my best advice to new community members and conference attendees: don't panic and carry a towel. Hopefully we have some Hitchhiker's Guides fans in here. I'll say at least don't panic. You probably don't have to bring a towel. But basically don't be afraid. I'm actually a complete and total introvert. I didn't speak to a single person I didn't know already at the first conference I attended. Literally, I knew one person there. That is the person I talked to for 3 days straight. Second conference I attended, I said, okay, I'll talk to some of the other attendees, but I'm just going to use Twitter. I'm not actually going to go up to them and talk to them. That led me, though, to realize two things. First of all, conferences are expensive. Second, conference attendees really are a friendly, welcoming bunch. People don't go to conferences because they don't like to talk to people. It's really the exact opposite. So definitely make the most of the time, effort, and money you've invested in being here. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you have any questions at all in any of the sessions, you know, sometimes I hear from new conference attendees that they didn't feel like they've been around long enough to ask a question. And that's, you know, any speaker here will tell you that they really want your questions. Also, don't hesitate to join in conversations. Jump in. I know that lots of times you'll see a group in the hallway, they'll be talking about something that you're interested in, but you think, oh, I don't know those people, so I'll just keep walking. Don't do that. Jump in, start talking, join the conversation. If you're a quiet person, like I originally was, use Twitter to break the ice. As I mentioned, I'm a little bit of an over-tweeter with almost 9,000 tweets. So I found that one good thing to do is if there's someone at a conference that you're really interested in meeting, just tweet at them. Just say, hey, you know, really appreciate what you do, would really like to say hi, can we meet up, something like that. And what I've learned is that most of the seasoned community members you see are humble and would be honored to help introduce you to the community. They would really, a lot of them don't realize how other people see them, and they don't realize that people see them as this seasoned member of the community. So when you ask them to help you kind of join the community, most of them, it really humbles them and it makes them very happy. So I've also learned that at every conference and in every community, there's at least one person that literally knows everyone and is happy to make introductions. So find that person, get to know them, ask them to introduce you to people, and that's a great way to just get more involved in the community. Another thing I will say is always assume the best in your fellow community members. I've heard people say, you know, well, I don't really think they want new people, or I don't really think they want to talk to me, or I have a differing opinion than them, so they're not going to want to hear from me. Don't assume that. Still, give it a shot. I know lots of times people just come across wrong, and if you give them the benefit of the doubt, go talk to them, chances are it may have just been a misunderstanding. That being said, do not tolerate exclusion. If you ever feel like someone is intentionally excluding you, that's not cool, and don't tolerate that. So I am saying give people the benefit of the doubt, but if after a couple of times it's obvious they're excluding you, then that's a problem that you should discuss with somebody. Another thing you should do at conferences is learn about local user groups and events in your area. A lot of these conferences are a great way just to find out. I actually went to a conference in DC and discovered that there was a PHP user group in my hometown of Dallas that I didn't even know existed. So it's a great way to just find out about groups you can join, different local events. And then one thing is do keep the community involvement going when you get home. Don't make this just okay, when I'm at conferences, I'm very involved in the community, and then I'll see you all next year. Join in local user groups, Twitter, IRC. There's a lot of different great ways to keep in touch, so keep that going. And then before you realize it, you'll be one of the seasoned community members. You just get involved, get active, and before you know it, you're one of those people that you were kind of looking at kind of on a pedestal. So had to throw in a Star Wars reference there. But basically, hopefully none of y'all will wield a lightsaber or become Darth Vader. But I do hope that anyone here that is a new community member, new conference attendee, will at some point look back and kind of say, hey, I was kind of that beginning new member, and now I feel like a seasoned member of the community. We'll say when that happens, don't forget what it's like to be a new community member on the outside looking in. I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in kind of seeing the same people, talking about the same things, and just the overall community involvement that we forget that there's other people that want to join the community that are going through kind of the same things that we went through when we first got involved. So definitely use those experiences you had as a new community member to make it easier for the next group of new members to join. Every community has its quirks. I do a lot of work with Magento. It's a PHP-based open source e-commerce system, and there's a very vibrant community around Magento, but it really wasn't until about a year and a half ago that I got involved, and as I got more and more involved, I realized that there were a few things that we did as a Magento community that made it harder for new members to join. There was a lot of I don't want to necessarily say secret groups, but like there's a lot of Skype conversations, and people didn't even realize that, hey, this is on Skype, it's a select group of people, we're not including everybody, and it wasn't necessarily intentional, it was just, hey, Skype's easy, let's use that. So started encouraging people, hey, instead of Skype, why don't we use IRC? Why don't we make this channel public? Why don't we, make people more aware of this? So you can always use what you've learned trying to join a community to make the process easier for the next group of people. So now, community involvement for seasoned conference vets, for people that have been to several conferences, that are very involved in the community, that sort of thing. I will say that senior or seasoned community members have a responsibility to the community just by the nature of being those senior-most members. And the big thing is communities that don't attract and retain new and diverse viewpoints are going to stagnate. The power of community is that we are constantly getting new viewpoints. We're learning from each other. We're sharing new information, new ideas. That doesn't happen if a community is closed off. So events are great to attract potential community members, but all that does is attract them. It's the existing community members that are going to determine if those new members stick around or not. One thing I will say is do not talk to the same people at every conference. This is something I see happen a lot, and again, it's not an intentional exclusion, it's just people see their friends and they want to talk to them, they're excited. So we have to basically be intentionally inclusive. You have to go out of your way to say, how can I include someone new in this conversation? How can I bring someone new into this community? Because if you don't, you'll kind of default back to talking to the same people, doing the same things. On the lines of being intentionally inclusive, I am in no way associated with this product, but I don't know if y'all have ever seen Cotton Bureau before. They print really cool t-shirts, but it's one of those deals that if they don't sell at least 10 of them, they don't print them. So there are 5 days left. If 4 more people buy this shirt, it will be printed, And I just thought that would be a really cool thing for seasoned conference members to wear. Next time you're at a conference, wear it. It's kind of a silly message, but I think it's a good message to just let people know, yes, come sit with us. Yesterday at lunch outside, I noticed that everyone, until the space kind of filled up, everyone went off and sat by themselves. And they kind of sat with the people that they were at the conference with. They weren't necessarily inviting other people to sit with them. And then once it kind of filled up, you could see people would get their food and they would stop. And they'd kind of look and they're like, okay, there's not any seats by themselves, so who am I going to sit by? So I think this would be a cool message to give people. So if you're not being intentionally inclusive, at best, you're being accidentally exclusive. Without realizing it, you're excluding people, and that's not good for the community. That's not a good message to send. I don't think that's anyone's intention even necessarily, but that is what's happening. Also, don't assume just because no one's complaining, everything is fine. Most people do not speak up if they feel excluded. They're just going to leave. They're going to either leave the conference, they're going to leave the community, they're going to go home after the conference and say, oh, I guess conferences aren't for me, or oh, I guess the open source community isn't interested in what I have to say. So keep that in mind, because we do sometimes exclude people without even realizing it, and they don't speak up. And if they don't speak up, again, we'll keep not realizing it. So that's why we have to be intentionally inclusive. Also, don't assume everyone is like you or wants to interact like you do. That was kind of a hard thing for me the first few conferences I went to. A lot of people were, hey, we're all going to go to the bar tonight. And I don't mind going to the bar, having a couple of drinks, that sort of thing, but it seemed like every night, the first couple of conferences I went to, if you wanted to meet up with anyone, you had to take a taxi, go to a bar, that sort of thing. Just wasn't what I was interested in. So you can't assume that everyone is like you or wants to interact like you do. The other thing is, as seasoned conference vets, we really need to create opportunities for new community members to learn from and get to know the seasoned members of the community. I've seen a lot of really cool things, again, kind of going back to Twitter because I spend way too much time on Twitter. I've seen some cool things from some of the senior-most community members in some communities where they'll just tweet and they'll say, hey, new to this conference, new to this community, come meet me for lunch at this local restaurant. And they just put together an informal group. It's not just their friends. It's not people they already knew. It's something they just put out there and say, yeah, do a quick little tweet up. And that's great. I mean, that is the best way to get new community members to really feel welcome, is just making it clear that this isn't, oh, me and my friends are going here, but we'll let you come along. It's, we want everyone to attend this. The other thing is provide positive reinforcement to new community members that engage with seasoned community members. Lots of times people will kind of test the waters. If they're new to a community, they're new to a conference, they're going to maybe approach someone, maybe talk to one person, see how it goes. If it doesn't go well, or if they're even not sure about it, then they won't try again. So if you see someone making a point to reach out to become part of the community, give them some sort of positive reinforcement, make them feel welcome. Then another thing that I think really helps is if someone does come up to you and say, hey, this is my first time at Openwest, or hey, this is my first time attending a conference, make a point to introduce them to at least one other community member. That way you're kind of passing it along, you're making them feel welcome, you're encouraging another seasoned community member to get to know some of the new members. That can be really, really powerful. I mean, if everyone in a community like this or at a conference like this would do that, I think it would have a huge impact on just how welcome everyone feels. And then speaking of this conference and conferences in general, I wanted to talk a little bit about community involvement for conference and user group organizers. I think there's some things, I really like the way Openwest is set up. Like I said, I like how it brings so many different communities together, but there's always more things that conferences can do to just help people feel more included, to promote this community building. Provide ample time between scheduled sessions. We get about 15 minutes here, and that's not bad. I liked also that it was a long lunch break. I've seen conferences that you go session to session to session. You never get a chance to talk to anyone. You hear from the speakers and that's it. And that's great. We're obviously here to learn from the speakers, But there is kind of that added benefit of networking, getting to know each other, community building, and that doesn't happen when you have a room full of people just listening to one person talk.
In some cases, you can watch the presentations afterwards, but you can't get those networking opportunities afterwards.
Oh, very true. That's very true. So,
But would you rather have less time to talk and have more time in between?
that's tricky. That depends on the topic, really, because I know that with some of the technical topics here, we're already doing 45-minute sessions. Squeezing them down to 30 minutes, you're not gonna be able to go really in depth. But for less technical topics, then definitely I would not mind giving up some speaking time to add some more kind of interaction time. So.
What if it was just 5 minutes? Do you think that would be enough?
Yeah. I mean, every little bit helps, especially if that time is structured or set aside in a way where you make it clear that, okay, the session's over, spend the next 5 minutes getting to know each other and getting to interact with each other, and that sort of thing. So there is a conference that I'm going to later this year that they actually, for every hour you're in a talk, you have an hour of transition time. And it's structured around, they actually call it networking time, which I think is funny because it's a developer conference. And it's like, you don't use the word networking to developers. That just rubs them the wrong way usually. They start looking for where the recruiters are hiding. So, but that's a big jump. And I know that's also hard because conferences are paid for by the sponsors. And generally the sponsors aren't getting a lot of value out of transition time. They're getting value out of, we're sponsoring this session, we have this person speaking, that sort of thing. So I don't think it's as easy as saying, give us an hour for every hour of talks, because I don't think that's necessarily practical, especially something as big as Openwest. But more time and making that time more intentionally about the community. And again, I think that Openwest especially is in a great position to say, don't just talk to PHP people. If you're a PHP person, go talk to a Ruby person. Kind of cross-pollinate between the different languages, between the different communities. There's a fairly new conference called PHP World, and they set it up specifically because, like, we have a Magento conference, there's a WordPress conference, there's a Drupal conference. All these different PHP systems have their own communities, their own conferences, but there wasn't one conference that encouraged them to all talk to each other. So some guys got together and created PHP World, and it's specific. There's Magento tracks, there's WordPress tracks. They get all these different people from these different communities there. But one thing that they do is one room might be the WordPress track in the morning, but then it becomes the Magento track in the afternoon. So if you're someone that likes to just go to one room and kind of sit, you end up seeing several different communities. So it's an interesting idea. I will say more hands-on workshop and interactive sessions, more sessions where it's not just kind of one person sharing information with a big group. That helps as well, because even if it's just talking to each other briefly during a presentation, that helps kind of break the ice, get people started talking to each other. So, and all of this also works well if you're part of a local user group or a local meetup or anything like that. Keep these ideas in mind, because it's not just conferences that can do these things. Schedule a open hackathon and encourage attendees to work with people that they don't yet know. It's amazing, you get a group of developers together in a room, you tell them to talk to each other, and they won't always do it. Get a group of developers in a room and tell them to solve a technical problem, immediately they start talking to each other about the best way to solve it. So hackathons are a great way. They're good for kind of like an opening night or second night social event, because you basically get people to be social and talk to each other without necessarily realizing it. So do skip, luckily this is becoming less and less common, but don't do the really contrived, cheesy icebreakers and mixers and things like that. I've seen things where you have to go fill out this bingo card of 5 different types of people that you've talked to and things like that, and especially with a tech audience, that just doesn't really go over well, and that almost turns people off from the idea of getting to know each other. Also, understand that different people are more comfortable interacting in different ways, and do your best to accommodate them all. There's only so much you can do. If someone is incredibly introverted. As a conference organizer, meetup organizer, you can't, necessarily just take them and make them less introverted or make them talk to other people. So I'm not saying that it's even possible to fully accommodate everybody, but there are things you can do for those introverts, create ways that they can interact with kind of a lower barrier to entry, that's just easier and more natural for them. And then, some of the, again, the kind of cheesy icebreakers and things like that. And I actually added if your venue allows for Openwest on this one. If your venue allows, set up rooms and roundtables and other layouts to create more conversations. If you think back to the 3 different conferences I showed photos of, that first one, all their rooms were set up with roundtables. So you did have to kind of turn to see the speaker, but before and after every talk, it was just natural that the people sitting at those tables started talking to each other. So if you're at a university and it's classroom style, there's not really much you can do about that. But like if you're organizing a local meetup and you're able to kind of set it up with round tables, with chairs and circles, things like that, do that before you just kind of default to like a classroom or theater setup. Another thing that I think would be very helpful is contact your returning attendees via email in advance. I do like that conferences have a code of conduct now. It's kind of sad the things that had to happen before that became common, but code of conducts are good. But that basically just says, here's the bare minimum standard of please don't be a jerk. It usually will also say, be diverse, be welcoming, but I think you can really go beyond that. You can ask your returning attendees to make new community members feel welcomed and valued. And I would say give them a specific example of what they can do. So for instance, send out an email to your returning attendees and tell them, hey, when you meet someone new that has never been to this conference before, introduce them to one other person that you know that was here last year. And if you give them that specific example, it makes them stop and think. It makes them say, hey, that is something really simple I could do. Another thing is create opportunities for seasoned community members to demonstrate they were once complete and total newbies. This really helps. It kind of breaks down that pedestal that we sometimes put the senior most community members on. Nothing makes someone feel welcomed and like they can really be a part of a community than seeing one of the senior most community members kind of brought down and made more human. Also make it easy for new community members to continue their involvement after the conference. Even if it's not your own hangout, even if it's not your own IRC channel, if you just know that like, hey, we're having a PHP conference, here's a few places that a lot of PHP developers hang out at online. Throw that in the ending keynote, say, hey, when you get back home, check out this IRC channel, check out this subreddit, check out this website, and encourage the attendees to keep the conversation going. Promote local user groups. I see a lot, again, kind of going back to my PHP background, some of the conferences do a great job of, they'll actually have a list. You go to wherever the sponsors are, and they'll have a table just for PHP user groups, and they'll have a list saying, find your state, find your city, here's your nearest meetup. And I think that's great for keeping people involved in the community. So I want to give you all a challenge for today. I'm going to end with a little bit of a challenge. So the last session before lunch is at 11 a.m., so it ends at 11:45 a.m., and then there are food trucks in the quad. I want you to find someone in your 11 a.m. session and go to lunch with them. And make it someone you haven't talked to yet, someone you haven't met yet, and just walk over to lunch with them, have a conversation, find out what they do, and just help them feel more welcome, more involved in the community. So, and with that, do keep in touch. Again, please rate the talk on Joined In. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on the web. If you have any questions that we don't have time to cover here today, then definitely catch them online. So, do we have any questions? Any thoughts? Any feedback?
It's a good presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Important topic, and I went. Pretty much all of us went through the phases of newbie. We started off with newbie, and like you didn't know anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's pretty easy once you get a small critical mass of people. You're like, oh, now I'm part of it.
Yeah.
I'm an outsider. But that transition from an outsider to a small group of friends is the critical piece, I think, to get started. So I remember there would be a group of people standing in a circle, and I just kind of like stand behind them in the circle.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And it was a little awkward, but sometimes that turned out to be a good opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that's where we do have to be very intentionally inclusive, because coming from that background of being very introverted, I still at conferences will sometimes just find a quiet place to sit and just watch. And I will notice, you will see times when circle of people talking, someone walks up, and the people in the circle are so involved in the conversation that they don't even notice that someone has walked up. So you kind of have to have in the back of your mind the whole time you're at a conference is there someone that I could be including? Is there someone that wants to join this conversation that is, not part of it yet? And I hate generalizations. I hate stereotypes. One interesting thing I found when I was researching this talk is a majority of developers are not classified as introverts. They are classified as extroverts. And that kind of goes against a lot of stereotypes people have about devs and about tech workers and about geeks and things like that. So, but with that, I do know that, again, going back to stereotype, a lot of us don't have the best social skills. A lot of us have to really try sometimes in social situations. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we will forget to be inclusive. And that's why, again, I think the code of conducts are great, but I think that people kind of look at them as, oh, here's this boilerplate of I shouldn't harass anyone, I shouldn't discriminate against anyone. And I think that the point of them really should be, I should actively, instead of basically passively avoiding these certain behaviors, I should actively seek out, this more positive behavior of being inclusive. So, anything else?
Really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
Gives me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
I feel
Cool.
like I'm in what you were talking about, that transition from newbie to community member.
Mhm.
This conference has really been that transition for me.
Awesome.
And I think for me the best thing I did was volunteer.
Yeah.
Now I have a job and a purpose, so I can't work and
True,
and
true.
hide and stuff. So that's been really cool. But everything you said, I just really thought was very true and awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, there are a lot of great people that are going through the transition from kind of outsider to insider in the community that will push through it and will make it happen. We'll do smart things like, oh, I'm going to volunteer at this conference. But I think for every one of those, there's at least 3 or 4 people that if we don't help pull them into the community, they won't join. So.
I think that's something I can think of times that people come into groups that I've been talking.
Just kind of stand quietly nearby.
And I'm not the best at saying, hey, come on in.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know how to introduce myself.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
But you have given me the fire to do that.
Cool, cool.
All you need to know is be aware of it and then spend a little bit of effort. I think if you consciously put some effort into it, I think it would not be that hard. So definitely we'll follow your goal, your goal you set for us.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank y'all very much. And I'm going to